People who traveled the world, what did you choose not to say about a country you visited to keep the story positive? When I fell down a flight of stairs in Hungary and broke my back, not a single person stopped to help me while I screamed in pain. I remember a girl in Russia telling me that she once called the ambulance for a stranger that had had an accident in the street and that the police kept questioning her about how she knew the victim. They didn't believe she wasn't involved because in Russia you would not commonly just help a stranger like that. Edit, for the record, I am not trying to say that Russians would never be helpful. I was only in Russia for 2 weeks and this is just a story a Muscovite girl told me and not my personal experience. I've seen videos from China where it seems to go to an extreme. Someone is run over by a car on a busy street in daylight? Hundreds of people just walk past, cars drive around the body. Or over it. So, LPT, don't get injured in China. Edit, because of a billion replies, this is really just a comment on that such incidents seem to be more common in China compared to other countries. Not that all of China is like this, or that other countries aren't. There's multiple issues at play, including bystander effect, fear of scammers, fear of being forced to pay someone else's medical bills. And as you, Bortjor, pointed out, there have been attempts to improve the situation, like Shenzhen's Good Samaritan laws. It's just that the idea of being seriously injured and having people simply ignore me both infuriates and scares the hell out of me. Getting hit by a car in China is different than other countries because the person at fault has to pay for the victim's medical bills and care for the rest of their life as relates to the accident, while if the person dies it is a flat fine to the family. This causes people in China to put their car in reverse and run the person over again to make sure they died because it is a lot harder to prove that it murder for that in China. I thought I hit a pothole, etc. Edit, you, statistical_mechanic, you, 11 millions, and you, Cliff99 have pointed out to me that this has been shown as unlikely and misinterpreted via Snopes. All take unintended consequences of laws that sound like a good idea at the time for $500, Alex. There was one where someone run over a small child, stopped then reversed back and ran over it a couple more times. No one seemed to even bat an eye to it. I think it was something to do with it being worse for the driver if the person survives or something, so they try and kill them? Yeah, you either pay funeral expenses or medical bills for life. So people will kill the victim to save money. That's fucked up beyond words. It's actually distressingly common. It's insane that they don't differentiate between intentionally killing and accidentally killing. There should be an actual punishment for, murder. Instead they get a fine. So bizarre. In Amsterdam, even the guy who mugged me spoke excellent English. Same. But he said he was from Queens, NY. So. Edit, I don't really know proper Reddit, but I think this is where I should tell the story for people who wants it, right? He approached me and a friend on a secluded stretch in a park, daytime, asking for €5 for gas and even offered to drive us to an ATM if we didn't have any cash. Needless to say, we opted for the "I don't have any money, sorry," and respectfully declined his otherwise generous offer about driving us to an ATM. He's making small talk, in retrospect, buying time, and a guy bikes past us and gives an obvious hand signal to our guy, who immediately looked at the passing biker, and my friend concurrently decides the best way to make him stop asking for €5 was to pull out his wallet and show him how empty it was, except he spotted a €5 bill and promptly snatched the wallet angrily as tons of small coins and pennies fell out. He takes the €5 bill and throws the wallet on the ground, walking away, going on about how he's from Queens, NY and people get got for lying there. Things take an unsurprising turn when he, after having paced off about 4 to 5 meters, decided to come back and pick up the coins whilst angrily and aggressively lecturing us on moral and ethical implications of lying, after having just stolen from my friend. On the way back, we coincidentally passed a police station, reported it, saw him get picked up by the cops from the exact spot he approached us. Saw him again, at the same spot a day later. He knew. Edit, he came back, picked up the coins and returned them to my friend. Bosnia is full of trash. I love that country, but damn, is it littered. If you're hiking in the countryside and you see a small lovely path, don't take it, it leads to a dump. Almost every village has one. Same with Egypt. Ladybird Johnson's anti-littering campaign, widely credited for the switch in the US, was not a universal moment of clarity for the world, not at all. India was spectacularly bad on this front. At one point I asked our tour guide if he knew the location of a trash can and he responded with "I'll take care of that," and threw an empty water bottle over the wall into someone's front yard. 20 meters from a UNESCO heritage site. I love that he took the burden of throwing your trash onto someone's property off your shoulders. A true guide. When my father came back from a business trip in China, he had a broken leg. He told us that he had slipped on some stairs. It was only many years later that I found out the Chinese military police had thrown him off a bridge and left him for dead. He was part of an arbitration team that had been brought in on a legal case against the government for negligence. I don't know why he kept it secret from us for so long, but it certainly changed the way I saw China. You are ridiculously safe in any area of Amsterdam at any time of day or night, as long as there aren't groups of young Middle Easterners in the vicinity. Sounds like both of my tours in Iraq. ALMAO. Also depressing. Can confirm. Went to holiday with a friend to Amsterdam and seen no trouble until the final night. When walking back to our hostel, my friend and I got surrounded by a group of 6 guys, all of which looked Middle Eastern, demanding we buy drugs off them. I've never touched the stuff and neither of us had any cash on us. One of the guys looked no older than 16 and was much smaller than me. I picked a moment and grabbed my friend and shouldered past the young guy and sprinted with the gang chasing us to one of the busy streets where many other tourists were still out enjoying themselves. Once we got mixed in with the crowd, we lost the gang and quickly made our way to our hostel. We decided to call it an early night. Amsterdam is a great city and I loved the culture and the bustling nights along the canals and in the bars. But I'll admit I came close to wetting myself with fear that night. Edit: I should clarify, I'll definitely be going back to Amsterdam in the future. I'll just be more cautious to stick to the busier streets and crowds. Every city has their sketchier areas. Edit 2, should also clarify that I had a space cake while I was there, so I have touched the stuff per se, but that's it on the drugs. It's just not my thing. As a Middle Eastern, I kinda feel sad about this because due to people like these, everyone thinks we're all like them. You know, couple of bad apples spoil the bunch. Edit: to clarify, by a couple of, I didn't exactly mean to say there's only a few. You missed a golden opportunity to either say a few bad chickpeas spoiling the hummus, or a bit of horse ruining the kebab. Cheeky smiley face. Edit: yes, I get it, horse is delicious, and I completely agree. That doesn't change the fact that there was a huge uproar about someone finding horsemeat in their kebab, because others don't like the idea of someone eating horse. The sheer number of people sleeping on the street, on footpaths, under bridges in Mumbai and Pune, India. Whole families. I just got back and am still thinking about it. There was a lot to love about India, but we saw some heartbreaking things too. The contrast in Pune between the huge tech offices and the homeless people in front really stands out. The contrast in San Francisco between the huge tech offices and the homeless people in front really stands out. I was offered underage sex in SE Asia. Way underage. Turns out it's depressingly common, and many American European pedophiles come here for that reason. Shit's fucked up with how cheap life is sometimes. Bangkok, February 2003. After working 12 hours for 5 days, I took a tuk-tuk to the center of the city. The driver understood little English, so he brought me to another driver who spoke it better. The dialogue with the other guy went like this. Him: little girls? Me: no thank you, I want to tour the city for an hour or two. Him: little girls? Me: no thanks, I'm not interested, but I would like to stop by a silk shop. Him, with an encouraging tone: little girls? Me: I said no, I have a girlfriend. At this point the man paused, evidently thinking about the problem. After a few seconds he looked at me and with a knowing smile he said, very little girls. I changed driver. Even longer pause: little boys? I spent a few years living in Southeast Asia, you are not wrong. But, one thing I also noticed there, is that a lot of gay Europeans live there too. Why? Because it's very easy to fuck young-looking 20-year-old men, lack of facial hair. I lived in Laos where it is illegal for Western men to fuck local women, but I had gay staff working for me who regularly went out to pick up young men. It's a very easy lifestyle for them. As a general rule, I enjoyed my brief visit to Paris, however I did have a couple of times when I'd visit a shop and the workers would just be dicks to me. I speak French okay, but I'm a bit slow, and I'd try to talk in French and the shopkeepers would basically laugh in my face, talk about me to each other when I was standing in front of them. Still, only a minor thing, I want to visit France again. Paris equals France. Go literally anywhere else and you'll probably like it a lot more. Even French people don't like Parisians. FTFY, even Parisians don't like Parisians. Having said the joke, in truth we were treated very well there. I was prepared to hate it but would love to go back. Hookers almost getting into a fistfight over the price of a blowjob they were both offering. Saturday night in Prague, Czech Republic. Why would you not mention that? That's a highlight. I guess it would be slightly awkward saying to your parents. One night I went to pick up a prostitute and they got into a bidding war over the price to suck my knob, fists and all sorts. Mom. Edit. Wow. Thank you for the gold. I was an exchange student in Vietnam. Wonderful experience, but my less fond memories include 1. People literally chasing me up a mountainside trying to sell me coconuts and shrimp-flavored Pringles. 14 of them, one of me. 2. Eating breakfast when I felt something pull on my leg. A beggar with no limbs had rolled under my table and was biting my pants. 3. Children shitting on the steps of the Hanoi Opera House. 4. Tour buses full of Australians throwing beer cans at people from the windows. 5. Almost dying multiple times while traveling on the scariest roads I've ever seen. 6. Finding out that the windshield in our microbus had been sold and replaced with regular glass when a chicken flew through it. Lots of stitches involved from a very sketchy doctor. 7. Speaking of healthcare, I got a first-hand look at the hospital system after contracting intestinal anthrax. I lost 24 pounds in 5 days, and my hair fell out, along with 2 teeth. I also came back home with tapeworms. Edit. I posted the below in one of my other replies, but I really did have a great experience while studying there and highly recommend it as a travel destination. I visited Vietnam at a very interesting time, not that long after relations had been reopened with the US. Almost everyone I met was friendly, positive, and welcoming. I have a lot of great memories, like sneaking out for picnics with the Vietnamese students or attending an underground rock show with them. My history professor from the university coming to the hospital and singing lullabies from his village. A cyclo driver inviting me back to his house for dinner so he could talk about his sisters that had made it out and settled not 20 miles from where I grew up in California. An old lady at the market coming up, taking the money back out of my wallet where it was folded, smoothing it out, and giving me her own money clip to use so Ho Chi Minh's portrait wouldn't get wrinkled. A poet who was obsessed with Khalil Gibran giving me a copy of all his works he had translated into both English and Vietnamese so that I wouldn't forget that poetry is truth in any language. And countless other people that went out of their way make Vietnam feel like a special place in the world. Eating breakfast when I felt something pull on my leg. A beggar with no limbs had rolled under my table and was biting my pants. What the fuck? Did you stop reading there? 'Cause it got worse. I generally tell my stories, because I want to share what the experience is really like and help other travelers make safe decisions. That said, my parents will never know that I got robbed in Jerusalem. I still love the city, but I was definitely on my guard for the rest of the visit. I just don't want them to think less of me. Oh, and the guy had returned to the same place when I brought the police to the spot, and he still had my stuff, so I got it back, which is nothing short of a miracle. He wasn't the brightest criminal. The struggle is real. Not too many people are happy to hear Australians shoot and kill kangaroos on a regular basis. Or that we eat them. Or that they are primarily pet food. But it's more akin to Americans and deer. Even down to the damage they do to vehicles. Nothing scarier than a giant red bounding beside you at dangerous speeds. Not only that, they have no natural predators and breed like crazy. People also tend to think, oh, it's a cute, furry, exotic animal from a strange, foreign land, why are they eating, shooting, hitting it with a Nissan Navara? Oh my god, it must be endangered. 1. Oh, no. Nope. Far from it. Quite the opposite. In fact, there are more roos on the continent now than before white settlement. Why? The kangaroo is a grassland species. Hopping isn't the best mode of transport in, say, dense forest or scrub. You tend to hit a lot of shit, and that's what most of the temperate parts of Australia on the eastern seaboard were pre-1788. When Whitey started clearing all that scrub, and planting wheat and barley and such, the amount of land that could support roos skyrocketed. Now, there are more roos than ever. Also, they make fantastic leather and shoes. Roo hide is the strongest leather for its weight in the world. Lotta high-end sports shoes from guys like Asics and Adidas are made from Skippy. The Audi TT Roadster uses it in the seats, and since it's light but strong, a lot of it makes its way into luxury aircraft. And a certain archaeologist is quite fond of Packer Leather's K-Whip products. Oh my god. Roo from Winnie the Pooh stood for kangaroo, because he was a kangaroo. I need to lie down for a bit. Edit, I get it, his mom's name is Kanga, holy poo. His mum was called Kanga too. Stop, this is too much for one morning. Piglet was also a piglet. No natural predators. Too fucking right, mate. Got robbed in Barcelona. Last night there, got back to the apartment, which was locked, and every valuable was gone, but they left our passports and USD. They even took my suitcase. I still think it was a setup from the people renting us the apartment. Police could do nothing. Funny thing was, that whoever stole our stuff resold it because a picture of two Spanish people showed up on our cloud storage from the tablet. Also my mom had her wedding ring stolen. The one day in her life she decided to wear a different ring. Edit, grammar, autocorrect. Edit 2, just got a puppy and have been off Reddit. To answer a few questions. It was a rental off of vrbo.com with electric locks that used a card to open the front door. Also it was in a decent neighborhood. My mom took it the hardest, sister was crying, dad was consoling and I was ready to fight. Despite all of that, the police were very nice, they actually came to inspect the locks which showed no sign of forced entry. I still enjoyed my time in Spain, but it's a weird feeling to be violated like that. When you go to Southeast Asia, one thing you are struck by is their carefree approach to road safety. From your tuk-tuk it's typical to see a whole family on a single motorbike, none wearing helmets, zipping through congested traffic without a worry in the world. As a tourist you know the whole thing is dangerous as hell, but it all seems to work in its own way and it's even a little charming and exhilarating to experience. On the way to the airport in Thailand we drove past the carnage of a motorbike accident. No helmet of course, rider was plastered across the road. Try not to relive that memory when talking about the trip. A related story I have, in Vietnam, I saw a whole family, as you said, on one motorbike, but the kid was doing his homework on the back of it. I also saw a minor crash, but rather than throwing hands, they got up, brushed off, and cops came and straightened the handlebars out. Yes. Was in Vietnam last year, looking out the window of the bus we were in it was dad kid mom breastfeeding baby, on a motorbike. Peru. Was raped by my taxi driver who knew I was solely in that country to volunteer in the hospitals. Cops treated me like shit and told me the bruises on my neck were love marks, that if I tested positive for any drugs I would be charged because surely I put the drugs in my system knowingly, and that I was just a stupid American who was embarrassed by her fling. I just tell people that there was a mix-up at the airport is why I came back early. And just talk about the poverty and stuff. Edit, this was an official marked taxi. My actions immediately afterwards didn't make sense as I was in an incredible amount of shock waking up naked in a hotel with semen in me and robbed. I couldn't even speak English to the others in my group. Or complete sentences for that matter, I just kept starting the thought but collapsing into hysterics. Recovery me IDK. I typically do fine. I tried to seek counseling back in the States at a reputable facility but they seemed more interested in making me feel worse, so I only went to one session. I was berated by family who just told me that I was stupid and I set myself up. Which of course was true but didn't help. So I really just shut down. That was my worst semester in college, but I moved forward and became a Dean's List student and am now in grad school. I got seriously involved in running and have completed many road races since then. It's my outlet. Thankfully I've only had to take a taxi a couple of times after. I always call someone and have a conversation as my protection. No matter what country, a taxi driver is someone who blindly trust. It feels weird having all the support from strangers on here. For those of you who are the "I told you so" crew, that doesn't help. Yes, I was told to be careful. So I was. I blindly trusted an official taxi driver. Edit 2, the whole thing was a bit of a blur to me. Yes, I know that I'm missing information and am confused. Drugs and shock do that to someone. Prostitutes and pickpockets thrive in Barcelona. Not to mention all the graffiti telling tourists to fuck off. I actually speak a bit of Catalan thanks to having friends from there, so yes, I can understand what random people say about me as we pass in the streets. It's changed a lot since the financial crisis and is now quite a hostile city, I think, understandably, given the amount of tourists, 7 million a year in a city of 1 million people, and the 50% youth unemployment. I've always thought it's a stupid attitude to have if you live somewhere with high levels of tourism. Good luck getting that unemployment rate down when all those tourists stop pumping money into your city. The main issue is with tourists using apartments as holiday rentals. You can get 3 times the rent per month on Airbnb than you can letting to a local. This has essentially turned local communities into tourist ghettos, and locals have to put up with partying and a general disrespect from the holiday makers. I mean, I can see why they're pissed off, but it manifests itself into outright hostility sometimes. I've visited Barcelona a couple of times a year for the past 10 years or so, and although the prostitution and pickpockets have always been a thing, the hostility amongst the locals is much more recent. Barcelona is still a fun city though and well worth visiting, it's just changed. Edit, I totally agree with and support them on this issue. We have similar problems where I live. Sometimes people forget ordinary people live in the cities they holiday in. Teenage boys and girls crowd the streets of Krakow, Poland at night handing out pamphlets for brothels and strip clubs. Like literally every 10 feet. Edit, an accent and a misspelling. Edit 2, a few people noting they didn't notice the pamphleteers, perhaps the timing of when I was there was a factor. For what it's worth, it was early April, yeah WTF, it was snowing in early April, on the weekend. Edit 3, so, you, Lared 930 helped me figure out that I stayed at a hostel called Greg and Tom Hostel, Florianska 43. Final edit, to everyone who's saying I'm exaggerating and it's not as prevalent as I make it out to seem, I can only speak from my experience and recollection. That being said, I didn't comment to paint Krakow in a negative light. In fact, quite the opposite. To me, this thread was a perfect place to share my experience because of how much I absolutely loved the city and enjoyed my time there in spite of it. That's one reason I tend to avoid telling it when talking about my travels, because I don't want to discourage anyone from visiting the city and the surrounding area. So yeah, in any case, go visit Krakow. And if you don't want the same experience, avoid Florianska and the surrounding area at night. Reminds me of Las Vegas. Except replace teenage boys and girls with elderly Mexican women. There's a lot of stray dogs in Peru. I've heard that stray dogs are kind of the norm in Latin American countries, and most of the ones I encountered didn't want anything to do with anyone passing by. However, there was one stray that I passed frequently while walking to a project I was working at, and he was extremely aggressive, to the point that I started carrying rocks in my bag in case he chased me. He would follow me for blocks, remaining hidden in a yard until I passed by. He'd bare his teeth and growl. He also slobbered a lot. I didn't think it was rabies, but I'm also not 100% convinced it's not rabies. I lived in various parts of Guatemala for a few years and it was the same there. Once in a while the police would set aside a certain day or days to cull the problem because they couldn't deal with the sheer number of dogs out there. They'd make an announcement to keep your dogs indoors and then roll up on all the strays and shoot them. I walked by a police truck once with a bed filled with dog carcasses and swarming with flies. That wasn't even the worst thing I saw in Guatemala by a long shot. Beijing is a very odd mix of super clean and absolutely filthy. That sort of thing doesn't bother me, but I can see how it would bother some people. Some guy's dick flopping up and down as he staggered half-naked, supported by 2 friends, through the streets of Morocco, while loudly cheering. I was honestly pretty impressed. Well, if his junk was being supported by 2 people, I can understand why you would be impressed. The train stations in Rome are filled with teenage pickpockets. 2 different groups made attempts at us in 5 minutes. It was actually fun to watch once we realized their strategy. I got shit on by a bird in Italy. Nothing against Italy though. I just hate birds now. The amount of homeless people sitting along Kalakaua Avenue in those little pergola areas in Waikiki, Hawaii. The amount of children selling you stuff in the streets. At any one point you could have 5 different kids competing with each other to sell you the exact same shitty keychain. Seeing poverty at that level shatters your perspective. Edit, this was in Peru. Edit, various places in Peru. Lima especially. Haiti was the worst I'd ever seen. I was on a cruise, can't remember the company, but they had their own little area of Haiti fenced off. The ship docked, we got out and had a great time in the beaches and sun. Nothing out of the ordinary until lunchtime. It was an all-you-could-eat buffet served by the ship's crew. We were told not to throw any food over the fences to the children, or else we'd have to go back to the ship. And that was when I noticed them. Scattered in the woods everywhere were little Haitian children crouched down trying to get anyone's attention and have them throw food to them. That was the first and last time I saw true poverty, and it made it so much worse that the whole time I was basically flaunting my wealth with my fancy cruise ship and all-you-can-eat buffet. And unfortunately, cruises like that are Haiti's best way of getting currency into the economy. Yup, I made sure to buy a few things in the area where they let us interact with the locals. Switzerland was absolutely stunning, if there weren't any people around. The Swiss people I met were, to a person, very rude. In the old adage, if you meet one asshole in a day, he's an asshole. If everyone you meet is an asshole, you're the asshole. I went and pored over everything I did, said to see if I'd been in the slightest bit rude, mean, snotty, superior, anything. I'm an American, and this was the 80s, we were all trying to be nice to everyone. After all, Russia was almost at the breaking point, we were in the United Colors of Benetton. I seriously wasn't trying to be a dick in any way, yet was treated with dickishness at every turn. All in all, I visited 9 countries when I was there, and I can't say the slightest bad thing about any of them, except Switzerland. French people? Amazing, polite, sweet. Parisians were a bit New York-style superior, or the other way around, but are still great folks. Germans were gracious, polite, funny. Italians, oof, I didn't want to leave. Spain and Portugal were the same way. Greece was stunning and the folks treated you like you were family. Switzerland, not so much. The sheer number of elderly people on scooters telling me to get out the Fucking way, in Scarborough, North Yorkshire. Edit, some people have been asking, I'm from Norway and was in Scarborough as a part of a school trip when I was 16. Second edit, we also went to Whitby, York, the North York Moors, Castle Howard, and some tiny town I can't remember the name of. I liked it a lot. Iran, the friendliest people you'll ever met, ancient ruins, beautiful mountain vistas. But goddamn every hotel toilet stunk. Bolivia. Everyone told me it's great. The people were cunts, they piss in the streets, I saw several drivers fist-fighting over petty reasons, they yell, are rude, very uneducated, lie and want your money. The food is awful and I had diarrhea the entire time I was there. Turns out a lot of people told me Bolivia was great because it was cheap. Well, you get what you pay for. Still, Uyuni was amazing and I really liked the Amazon there. Not a big fan of most of the cities though. Auckland is boring as shit. Countryside is nice though. Went up to the far north of New Zealand, and was told this by a tour guide. If you go to Auckland, there are 2 things you have to do. The first is go to the aquarium. It's a very nice aquarium, and exhibits a lot of native New Zealand sea life. The second thing is leave Auckland. Edit, why are people saying the aquarium is shit and non-native? There are plenty of non-native things there, but half the aquarium was devoted to New Zealand sea life, the short-tailed stingrays, eels, spiny sea dragons, ragged-toothed sharks. I thought it was great, one of the better ones I've been to even though it's not overwhelmingly spectacular. It was a great NZ and Southern Hemisphere homage. Egypt is the most polluted country I have ever been to. It's like living in a landfill. A friend of mine is a traveling mechanic who works in Nigeria, Tanzania, Saudi Arabia, India, Madagascar etc. The only place he'll never go back to is Cairo. Portugal was like a ghost of an once a magnificent empire. Cities are empty, working people, hell there is no working people. Beautiful place with a lot of homeless people and empty urban areas. Rome, Italy. Hawkers everywhere. No matter where you go, tourist area or not, you will be accosted by a huge number of hawkers aggressively trying to sell you something. Selfie stick? Selfie stick? Probably the one part that I hated about my Europe trip last year. My family is Chinese, so we speak Chinese while walking around places, and then these guys tried to sell us stuff, realized we were speaking Chinese, and they started speaking perfect Chinese too. North Korea. Nothing is wrong. Everything's great. God bless Kim Jong-un. Sri Lanka. Friend almost got raped on a train. She was molested, some guy was touching her legs while masturbating. It was crowded but she was able to cry for help. Edit, she is 17 years old and does all these global volunteering stuff. She had a group with her but since the train is humid and extremely crowded, they had to spread out to find seats. In Amsterdam, the hostel I was at had co-ed dorms. So it wasn't uncommon for people to be having sex or whatever. New guy moves in next to me on third day. Third night he carries in totally unconscious girl and proceeds to undress her. It was definitely going in the rape direction. I went and got the hostel supervisor, because my German is bad and I was in the rare mood at 19 where I didn't want to get into a fist fight. By the time we're back in the room, about 45 seconds, he's getting her pants off and her shirt is off. The hostel guy starts questioning him. He says it's his girlfriend, etc. etc. But when we ask him her name he doesn't know it. He's pissed off, starts throwing things all over the place and gets ejected. We moved her into a private room, the only one in the hostel, and I slept by the door that night. When she woke up in the morning I told her what happened and she broke down. It was awful. I've never told anyone that story because Amsterdam was amazing otherwise and rape stories don't make for story material. Well, no wonder you were having trouble communicating if you were speaking German. Cheekiness aside, you're a good fucking person for what you did. The harsh level of racism in Japan. There were restaurants that I could be taken to for a business lunch, but only lunch. They were closed to me at night for dinner because I was not Japanese. Other places I wasn't allowed in under any circumstances. The local business partners wouldn't even discuss it. They would just say, no, no, not possible, and look around uncomfortably. Afghanistan. In the ethnically Pashtun areas especially, young boys are prized for their beauty and are sexually exploited by older men in a bizarre form of apprenticeship. It's very widespread and it is not only socially accepted, is a kind of social status symbol for the men who engage in these relationships. Most boys end up married off to a woman in the abuser's extended family, or enter into the man's business when they hit puberty. Relationships stop when a boy starts to get facial hair, because that makes it homosexual. It's really hard to talk about, because most Americans have a hard time believing it. There is a fascinating essay written about the phenomenon by a female American PhD sociologist, who traveled around the country for a while with the USMC. Maybe someone can find the article if there's sufficient interest. Djibouti was pretty awful. Why people would ever go on holiday there is beyond me. For the sake of my family's nerves I never told them that the Chinese restaurant we ate at was bombed several weeks after I left. Same shit happened in Kabul to a good Lebanese restaurant, but everybody already knows Kabul is a shithole. Serious question, why did you go to Djibouti? Peru was amazing, except the animals were treated like shit. I know that they were considered working animals, but seeing people throw rocks at the cats was really heart-wrenching. I saw a dog that had gotten hit by a truck. Another dog was torn between whining and seeming upset and eating the dead one, because it was literally starving. It was so starved for affection that it got an erection when we went to pet it. It's been 3 years and it still makes me sad. Especially since one of the people offered to let me have a kitten, and I had no way to bring it back home with me. I feel like shit every time I think about it. Our first night in Iceland, a bartender in Reykjavik slipped a drug into our drink. We started feeling woozy and quickly left the bar. Next thing I knew it was a few hours later, I'm somewhere in downtown Reykjavik at 11 p.m., with no idea where my friends were. After wandering around for 2 hours looking for them, I remembered that iMessages could send over Wi-Fi, so I found a bar to sit in and tried to text my friends. Steve came to at 1 a.m., and found himself running through a residential neighborhood, bleeding from his forehead, with no idea what had happened. He found a hotel, could remember where our Airbnb was, and got a room. The hotel had Wi-Fi, so he got my messages. Sent me a picture of his battered face, told me the name of the hotel and his room number. Neither of us had heard from Bob. I took a screenshot of the directions from Google Maps, then started walking. But now I was convinced Iceland was super dangerous. We'd been here less than 24 hours, already drugged and mugged, and my semi-incapacitated self decided the best way to avoid danger was to look scary. So for the next hour as I walked the 4 kilometers to the nearest Icelander hotel, I growled loudly. It did work though. The few people who saw me crossed the street to the other sidewalk. It's a wonder no one called the police on the crazy American. Finally saw the hotel sign, walked inside, and asked the front desk how to get to room 318. He starts laughing and says they only have 2 stories, I'm at the wrong place. Fuck. He kindly called around to other Icelander hotels, asking if they had a guest named Steve. Turns out his hotel was 6 kilometers away. It's now 2:30 a.m. and my phone is at 3%, no way I'll make it on foot, so he called a cab for me. I've never been happier to see Steve than when he opened his hotel room door. We talked briefly, decided to sleep for the night and look for Bob in the morning. Right as I'm drifting off, my phone lights up with a message from him asking where the hell we are. He's at the apartment and insists we come back. Fine. We take a cab back. Bob tells us that he'd woken up 3 hours earlier, from sleeping under some stairs in a random building, with a man screaming at him in Icelandic. The guy picked him up by his shirt and threw him outside. He wandered hazily through the city for an hour, trying to get his bearings. Whatever drug was in his system must have still been affecting his brain, because he thought that he was in Germany, where he grew up. He didn't know how he'd gotten there, but he wanted to get back home to America. A bunch of cabs were parked outside of a bar, so he got in one and asked to go to the airport. The cabbie gave him a weird look, and said it was almost 2 hours away, but he'd go if Bob really wanted. Bob said yes. 10 minutes into the ride, he realized this wasn't Germany, panics. He took out his phone and found his itinerary, complete with address of the apartment. The cabbie rerouted, and Bob was safe inside. An hour later he remembered that he wasn't in Iceland alone. The next day I looked through my phone searching for evidence of what happened while I'd been blacked out. I'd been all over Reykjavik, as evidenced by my blurry photos. There were several photos of me holding a large orange cat, in different parts of the city, so apparently I'd abducted it temporarily. No idea why. Later we discovered that the bar had charged Steve's credit card $300 for the 2 beers he drank before we passed out. Assholes. This is the first time I've typed all this up, hope it made sense. In Rome, people will try and sell you shit even when you're eating at a restaurant. So fucking rude. I'm a Brit currently living in the San Francisco area and I'm always sure never to mention to people back home the overwhelming number of homeless people around here. It makes me so sad that people in one of the wealthiest cities in the wealthiest country on the planet have to live in a soiled sleeping bag under a freeway. Thanks for watching our video. If you like it, please smash the subscribe and like button to support the channel, so that we can create more quality content in the future.